Pentagon says the U.S. Navy drone was collecting scientific data for a civilian research vessel. The U.S. has now filed a formal diplomatic complaint with China asking for the drone's return.
Of course, this is just a few hours ahead of the President Obama's news conference happening at the White House. In the meantime, joining us now, Asia analyst Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. He's also author of a book, The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, you say this is more serious, that this is an act of war. Why?
Well, this is an act of war because the Chinese have seized U.S. naval property. Now, they tried to do this in March 2009 when the Chinese harassed the Impeccable, another unarmed U.S. Navy reconnaissance vessel. That was in the South China Sea. Fortunately, they were unable to do that. But they've also harassed the Bowditch, which is the ship from which this drone was seized. The Bowditch was interfered with in September 2002 in the Yellow Sea. And the Chinese state media said that they actually rammed the Bowditch. Now, I don't think that that's true, but there's so little information about it. However, whether you seize a drone or an aircraft carrier, the principle is the same. This is an act of piracy. It's an act of war against the United States.
What should the president say?
The president should get in front of the podium, look into the camera, and say that the United States will use all elements of its power to obtain the return of this drone. And if the Chinese don't send it back immediately, we need to start to impose costs on China. The reason why the Chinese have been interfering with U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force in its peripheral seas is because we've never imposed those costs on China for unacceptable behavior of interfering with our freedom of rights in the global commons. So therefore, something's got to be done. If it doesn't, this will just get worse.
Well, because of that pattern, do you think if the president said something to the effect of what you just said, that he would actually be believed?
I actually think at this point the Chinese don't believe whatever we say, and so that's why we actually have to do things. The Chinese are not going to get serious until we show them that we are, and so therefore this is a problem. It's going to get worse, and at this point we just cannot allow countries to grab U.S. assets in international water.
So let's take a step back, though. This is if we look over the last several weeks of news, you have the Chinese sending planes around Taiwan after Donald Trump had that phone call with the Taiwanese president. You have the evidence now that we do have very big military installations on these islands, these disputed islands in the South China Sea that China has built up. You now have where this happened. I just want our viewers to know where the drone was taken was 40 miles off the coast of the Philippines, and you have the Philippines president saying today to us, "We do not need you. Prepare to leave the Philippines." And we've had a presence in the Philippines for many, many years. How do you take all this news together, especially considering that we're right on the eve of a transition of government?
Yeah, this is the Chinese probably sending a message to the president-elect that they are willing to act. And the question is whether he is willing to back up his words. Also, it is a test of the U.S.-American political system in general because this is a time of leadership transition. But clearly there are so many things happening in the South China Sea and in other seas close to China's shores, which means that China is testing the international system in general. You know, these are these points in history that are inflection points where they see our reactions, and if they don't believe that we are firm in defending our principles, our friends and allies, and our own interests, this situation will just get worse. With the Philippines and President Duterte, he's genuinely anti-American, so we can expect more problems there. But most Filipinos support the United States, so we can ride this one out.
All right. Well, that's an interesting perspective for us today. We'll watch for the president's comments coming up at the news conference in just a few hours from now, and we'll be watching for any comments from President-elect Donald Trump as well. Gordon, great to have you as always. Thank you.